Over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff being posted over there by our very talented cast of writers. College football and NFL power ratings, the college ones from me, the NFL from Danny Vorgs. We've got a UFC preview for this weekend's card, NASCAR previews for this weekend, and a whole bunch of college football and NFL free picks from myself, Alan Moody, Jonathan Willis, Admir Algic. Lots of great stuff going on over at the website. Make sure that you check it all out. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB, the number 200, is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. At the top of the show here, I do want to remind you that once again, recording my Super Contest picks on the Blog Talk Radio channel. And then we have Brent on Skype. So again, the show will sound a little bit different here today. Probably going to be that way for the foreseeable future. But we'll be doing the first segment here on our Blog Talk Radio channel. I'll do the best I can with the audio, get that up to the same level as the Skype channel. But then that segment with Brent coming up here at the end of the show, like I said, recorded on Skype. So, all right, we take a look here at the Westgate SuperContest. 2-3 week for me last week for the Bang the Book podcast entry. 3-2 for our other entry here at BangTheBook.com, appropriately named BangTheBook.com. 5-5 for me so far here in the SuperContest. 6-4 for our other entry with the first 2 weeks here in the books. As we look back at last week, the field comes in at 56.52%. The Browns, a big help in that department. The Browns were taken by 61.7% of the field. 2,053 entries of the 3,328 took the Cleveland Browns in that Monday Night Football game, and the Browns do wind up covering in pretty comfortable fashion there over the Jets. The Jets were taken by 46 entrants in the Super Contest. So obviously a big difference there. 2,007 more picks on Cleveland than the Jets last week. If you take that Browns game out of the equation, you wind up with the field going 50.55% without that Browns cover. So obviously you can't take games away necessarily, but still some food for thought there for you as far as we look at what happened in week 2 of the Super Contest. Last week, the consensus, the most selected sides in each game came in at 9-7. The top 5 consensus, 3-2. So those were the 5 most popular picks. Obviously, the Browns being one of those. And again, taken by the highest number of entrants ever and the highest percentage of the field ever as well. For the season here, the consensus now 14-18, and the top 5 consensus 6-4 thus far. If we look over at the Super Contest Gold, and again, we'll update that here on a weekly basis, not just on the segment, but also in the recap article every Tuesday over at BangTheBook.com. The Gold field came in at 58.62% in week 2. Once again, the Browns very popular. 71 of 117 took the Browns in the Super Contest Gold. However, the Gold field, 53%. If you take out that Browns game, just go with the other 15 games. So once again, kind of getting back to what we expected to see with the differences between the traditional Super Contest and the Super Contest Gold, 2.5% to 3% on a weekly basis. You would expect to see the Gold do a little bit better than the traditional. That's what we saw here this past weekend. Also, as I mentioned, we're in the Circa Million. Does have some different lines compared to what the Super Contest has. I actually don't have that list here prepared for today's recording, but I can tell you that in the Circa Million, our Bang the Book -1 entry is 6-3-1, and my Bang the Book -2 entry 3-6-1. And by the way, Kirk Cousins can go find a rusty pitchfork and fornicate himself with that after that absolutely atrocious interception that wound up costing Minnesota not just a win, but also the cover, because there's a chance that they would have kicked a field goal there, turn a 2-score game or a touchdown game into a 1-score game, make it 21-19. Instead, throws that awful pick. Vikings don't come close to covering the number, when they get the ball back. So in any event, that's kind of the way that the cookie crumbled last week in the Circa Million. But, as we look at this week's NFL card, it's hard, and that goes without saying. And certainly we talked about this on Bang the Book Radio yesterday, and also we've talked about it throughout the week here. But, I mean, look, when it comes to the Super Contest, you can't play the Thursday night game. I mean, you can, but it's very hard to do because you have to have all 5 of your picks ready to go. So you have to be very clear on what's going on in terms of the injury situations for these teams. And also, you may lose some line value. You may lose some equity because, as we always talk about here, these Super Contest lines don't move. They come out on Wednesday night, and they do not move. They do not adjust to what the market has. It's what we saw last week with the Browns and why they were taken by so many entrants, because they went from a 2.5 to a 6.5 point favorite with the Sam Darnold news. At 2.5, I don't know if the Browns are a consensus pick. I would say probably not. But because of the line adjustment there, you wind up with 4 points hovering around key numbers as well. The Browns taken by a very large percentage of the field. So those things happen here in the Super Contest, and you may get some Thursday practice injuries. You may get some Friday practice injuries. And if you lock in on that Thursday night game, well, you're SOL if some of those things happen. Let's say that you lock in on that Thursday night game and all of a sudden you find out that, Aaron Rodgers got hurt in practice on Friday. Well, if you already took the Packers, you've got them at 7.5. When the market probably adjusts that game to, Packers -1 or Packers pick 'em, something like that. So there's a lot of risk involved in taking that Thursday night game. You have to be very, very confident that that's what you want to take. So you scratch the Thursday game, and when you look specifically at this week, think of all the backup quarterback situations we have. Think of all the skill position injuries that we have. We've got 2 games with spreads above 3 touchdowns. So it's very hard this week to come up with 5 plays that you actually like. And especially when you consider that a lot of these games hovering around key numbers, you got the Cardinals -3. Well, I don't know what I'm going to get from Kyle Allen. I don't know what I'm going to get from Kyler Murray. Seahawks and Saints, Teddy Bridgewater, +4 is the line there in that one with the Saints a dog. Texans and Chargers, a 3-point line. I don't know what these 2 teams are right now. Chargers, a lot of cluster injuries in the secondary. Are the Texans able to take advantage with Deshaun Watson? Yeah, they certainly could. But how good are the Texans? Is Whitey Merciless going to be that player that can replace Jadeveon Clowney over the long haul this season? Will the Texans be able to get that pass rush going against Phillip Rivers and this Chargers offensive line? A lot of questions in that game. Rams and Browns, questions in that game. Bears and Redskins, no real injury notes in that game, but still, what are those 2 teams? So I think this was a very challenging week, to say the least. I did the best I could coming up with some picks and some leans here, and once again, I will throw this out there that, our picks aren't due until Friday night for the Golden Nugget, Saturday morning for both the Super Contest and the Circa Million, and I record this on Thursday evening so that I can have the show squared away, put together after recording this segment with Brent. So, again, these lines aren't going to move for the Super Contest. So my thought process may change a little bit. Maybe I uncover something or read something that, kind of changes my opinion about a game, something like that. But again, like I've always talked about here on the show, if it's a play that I like, unless it's some sort of dramatic injury that significantly alters the line, I'm not going to go and play the other side here after talking about the side that I liked on the segment. So you can take some solace in that. Again, the plays I talk about here may not make it onto my card. If I have my full 5-play card pretty much squared away, I still may change something. So just want to throw that out here before I start breaking down some of these games for week 3 in the Westgate SuperContest. So we go ahead and start here with rotation number 6 on the SuperContest card. That is the Detroit Lions. They are +6 on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, again, injuries playing such a big role here this week in the NFL. I mean, they play a big role every week, but it certainly feels like early on in the season here, the number of household name injuries is a very big deal here for a lot of these teams. And look, Detroit comes in a lot healthier for this game than Philadelphia. The Eagles canceling practice on Wednesday because of all the injuries. That's a rarity here in the NFL. The secondary is banged up. The receiving corps, it's in shambles. No Deshaun Jackson, no Alshon Jeffrey this week, in all likelihood for Philadelphia. And they really struggled to move the football against Atlanta. Now, I did have the Eagles last week in that game. Probably came a half yard short from winning that one, or obviously a 4th and 3 stop of Julio Jones. short of winning that game, but that wasn't the right side in that game. And it was a difficult loss, to say the least, but they weren't the right side. They only had, 140 yards of offense or something like that early on in the fourth quarter. They were really struggling to move the football, and that's just it. The Eagles have a lot of weapons. There's no doubt about that, but as these injuries mount, especially at wide receiver, start taking away guys from Carson Wentz. You start taking away guys that can create separation and give Wentz that window to throw into. That's one of the reasons why guys are backups. In a lot of cases, these guys are just as fast as the players that start, but they don't get that separation. They're not as good of route runners. And when things like that happen, you get turnovers. You get incompletions. You get behind the chains. So for the Eagles here, I think it's very challenging for them, given their injury situation to date, to get a lot of margin in this game, to blow the Lions out, beat them by a touchdown or more. I think it's a pretty challenging thing to do. Now, also, this is a secondary factor, maybe even a tertiary factor here, but the Eagles do play the Packers on a short week next Thursday. And with all of their injury considerations already, I think they're perfectly fine to win and get out. I think they don't care if they win this game by 2, by 3, by 4, by 6. I don't think it matters to them so long as they're able to pick up this win. And that's a different kind of mindset for a team. Anytime you put that level of complacency into the equation, makes it hard for you to go out there and blow out an opponent. So I think Detroit is pretty live here. Again, Philadelphia, only 5 yards per play so far on the season. And with Doug Peterson, with Carson Wentz, with all those offensive skill guys, 5 yards per play is a very disappointing output so far for Philadelphia. Look, the Lions, they'll give up some big plays now and then, but they are 4th in completion percentage against so far. So again, that conversation about will the Eagles create separation? The Lions, they don't have a premier pass rush or anything like that, but they do have a pretty underrated secondary. They've got some guys back there that can really play. You'd like to think that, this Matt Patricia defense would keep improving a little bit. The Lions do struggle to stop the run, but the Eagles don't run the football all that effectively. We'll see if they try to force feed that a little bit here in this game. But again, when you run the ball, makes it hard to create some margin. If Matt Stafford has time to throw, and he probably should, given how that Eagles pass rush has looked so far, the Philadelphia secondary is allowing yards in chunks. I think Detroit can move the ball. I think that they're certainly the much healthier team coming into this game. I think they're pretty live here in this one. So look at the Lions +6 this week in the Westgate SuperContest. Second play here of the ones that I like, the Oakland Raiders. They're +8.5. They are number 14 in the SuperContest rotation order. And I've been fairly impressed here so far this season with the Raiders. Picked up that win in week 1 over Denver. They jumped out to a 2-0 lead, or 10-0 lead, last week in week 2 before Patrick Mahomes just took the game over. And that's going to happen. And I understand that, perception of Oakland is down a little bit here because they got those 10 early points on a pretty lackluster Chiefs defense and then didn't do anything else. But still, I think the early game plans for John Gruden and his coaching staff have been really, really strong. I would expect a good start here for the Raiders, even though they've got that early kickoff and they've got the long travel to the Twin Cities after back-to-back home games. I would expect them to start strong here. And again, we talked about this concept, I believe, on Wednesday this week on BangTheBook Radio, where the Raiders are starting a long road trip. They do have a home game, quote-unquote, in London, but they're starting a long road trip. And a lot of times it's a good situational spot to bet on teams in other sports because they want to put that best foot forward. It's as fresh as they're going to be with all of these road games or at least away games in succession here. So I think we get a good effort from Oakland in this game here this week. Like I mentioned, Patty Mahomes took over last week. Kirk Cousins won't do that. And it's a lot harder to get margin running the football. And I think after Kirk Cousins made some of the decisions that he made in that game last week, I think Mike Zimmer wants to run the football more in this game. I think he wants to build off of the success that Dalvin Cook had last week. And that runs the clock, and it makes it hard for you to keep gaining margin because, again, you're getting yards, maybe 3 or 4. You're getting, gains 3 or 4 yards at a time. So I think that helps Oakland a little bit here Oakland has also defended the run pretty well so far. I think Gruden's going to expect a lot of running of the football. And certainly, he would like to make Kirk Cousins beat him. So I would anticipate flooding the box. I would anticipate run blitzes and things of that sort. And also, too, look, I read a great recap. And once again, Ted Wynn, one of the best analysts out there for the NFL, he wrote a Raiders recap with the all-22 camera angle over at The Athletic here this week. And he was talking about how, Paul Guenther against Kansas City changed things up. He tried to do whatever he could to slow down the Chiefs. And for a quarter or so, it worked. But the problem is that he worked a lot of new concepts, a lot of different looks into the equation here for the Raiders. And they had a lot of miscommunications. A lot of guys were running free. I think you get back to what you do best in a game like this against the Vikings. I think it's a more simplistic playbook, a lot more base packages, things that aren't going to confuse the defense, things that aren't going to leave guys just out there in space with nobody around. I think that they have a much better game plan here this week for this game against the Vikings. Guenther knows Mike Zimmer. They were together when Zimmer was the DC in Cincinnati and Guenther was one of the assistants. So there's some familiarity there. He has an idea of what Zimmer wants his identity to be, both as the head coach and also with the defense. The Vikings do have a good defense, but you've got intimate knowledge here of what Zimmer likes to do schematically with Paul Guenther. I think Gruden is the right type of guy to take advantage of that. Also, some situational angles here in this one. The Vikings are in a division sandwich. They played the Packers last week. They play the Bears next week. It's a tough spot here. You're not thinking about winning by a big number. You're thinking about winning and staying healthy and getting out so that you can beat those division opponents. The Raiders are still trying hard. John Gruden will have them prepared. So the Raiders, number 14 in the SuperContest here this week, plus 8.5 against the Minnesota Vikings. When you look around at the NFL here this week, again, so many injury considerations, lots of different things for you to try and factor into the equation. And the rest of this SuperContest segment here is brought to you by the Trends app, TRNDS. Again, so many injuries here this week, so you're looking for as much information as you can possibly find, and maybe historical trends are the way that you want to look. It can be difficult and time-consuming and a challenge to find a lot of this information, to find the right resources that are out there to see how teams do coming off of a loss, how teams do head-to-head against a certain opponent, how they do in cold weather or with long travel, much like we just talked about there in that game with the Oakland Raiders. After a bye weeks start in week 4 with the Jets and 49ers. So how do teams do with that extra prep time? The nice thing is the Trends app, only available on iOS right now, simplifies access to powerful data, allowing users to quickly self-source and share meaningful sports betting trends, all from the convenience of your own phone. You can identify new betting angles based on a variety of available filters. You don't have to go through and do extensive box score study or, hope that somebody tweets about these things, something like that. You don't have to just consume stats. You can go out there and find your own using this Trends app. Now, the Trends app is available for free on the App Store for iOS users. However, there is a premium subscription tier as well. And the folks over at Trends are giving away 100 to the first 100 users who sign up access to that premium subscription tier. Here's how you can enter for that. You tweet at BangTheBook and at Trends_sports. That's TRNDS_sports. And include a quick note as to why you think this Trends app and this tool would be helpful to you. The other option is you can visit the website over at www.trends-sports.com/bangthebook. Again, that's trnds-sports.com/bangthebook to sign up. And again, the first 100 users who use that URL to sign up will get a free month of the premium subscription tier. So again, you look for all of the possible angles that you can find in such a tight and efficient NFL market, and the app and the website belonging to Trends, once again, TRNDS, is a perfect fit for you here as you look at week 3 of the NFL season and beyond. So we take a look here at the rest of my Super Contest thoughts for Week 3. And, once again, it's tough, man. You got to scrape the bottom of the barrel a little bit here. And number 20, the New York Giants, plus 6.5, look like they're going to make it onto my card this week. When you look at Tampa Bay here so far this season, it has not been impressive. They didn't play particularly well in Week 1 against the 49ers. Winston had some pick sixes in there, and that was kind of the narrative. Well, if Winston doesn't do that, or, we're used to Winston throwing the interceptions, but they weren't moving the football all that effectively anyway. 4.7 yards per play in 2 games. You look back at last Thursday, and yes, Tampa Bay does have extra prep time, so something you can check out in the Trends app, see how teams do with some extra rest there. Look, they beat Carolina last week, and Cam Newton seemed to have gotten hurt late in the first quarter. The Panthers had 2 possessions. They had 104 yards to that point. They had turned it over on downs on the 1 possession, and they had a field goal on another. But, the Panthers were 3 for 14 on 3rd down last week, 0 for 3 on 4th down. So they turned it over on downs 3 times. It just wasn't a Carolina-esque performance, and especially with Cam Newton being banged up. So I think what that win for the Buccaneers signals is more about where Carolina is right now than where Tampa Bay is. The Bucs, 2 for 12 on 3rd down last week, 7 for 23 on the season. And I get it. The Giants have not played well in 2 games. They got carved up by Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott and that new-look Dallas offense in Week 1. And like I talked about, I think, last week when I was looking at, maybe taking Dallas in the Super Contest, the Giants just didn't read things properly. There wasn't a whole lot of film study. There wasn't a whole lot to know about Kellen Moore's offense. Now, I will grant you that they didn't play very well against the Bills' offense last week either, but they were only outgained by 18 yards, only outgained 5.8 to 5.6 yards per play. So, the offense wasn't awful. It wasn't as efficient as it could have been, but it wasn't awful. The defense, maybe they didn't play particularly well, but now you've got the new frontier with Daniel Jones, and everyone's going to individually elevate his play to try and help this team out. I think that Daniel Jones can make some throws that Eli couldn't. I think Daniel Jones can keep this team on the field with some 3rd down completions. I think you get more Saquon Barkley in this game, which, that can't hurt. He's the best player on the field for either team. You can make a case for Mike Evans, I guess. But Saquon Barkley is probably the best player on the field for either team. And with Jones, he's going to get more touches, whether it's in the running game or out of the backfield in the receiving game. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for the Giants to move the football more effectively this week with Jones as opposed to Manning. And again, maybe there's just a different vibe here to this Giants team, because this was a cloud hanging over them from the second that Daniel Jones was picked. It was kind of a question of, when does this change happen? When does this officially take hold? Well, it takes hold in Week 3. So now there's no uncertainty. Now it's Daniel Jones is our guy unless he gets hurt. And I think that helps the team overall. It kind of streamlines everything. It sort of takes that distraction out of everybody's mind. And I don't think the Buccaneers are a really polished product. Bruce Arians has improved this defense to a degree, but Jameis Winston still has accuracy issues. I don't think this Byron Leftwich offense is all that explosive. They've basically neutered Mike Evans at this point in time. We know Tampa Bay is not a particularly good team running the football. There are a lot of things going against the Buccaneers here in this spot. And I understand that they're a 6.5-point favorite, and maybe they are for a reason, but I think that there's some pyrite, some fool's gold to that win over Carolina last week. I think that maybe people looked at San Francisco's win over Cincinnati and said, okay, well, that's not that bad of a loss anymore. Maybe it's not, but the Buccaneers still have not played well, offensively anyway, in their first 2 games of the season here. I think they're going to have to score some points to cover this number. I don't know if that's going to be the case here. And also here for Daniel Jones, one last note on this game. The Bucs are tied for 26th in quarterback hits through 2 games so far. So Daniel Jones should have time to throw the football. And obviously you have to be very careful blitzing the Giants, because if you blitz and you guess wrong and it's a handoff to Saquon Barkley, it's going the other way in a hurry. So that should stem the pass rush a little bit. Give Jones time to throw. Give him some windows to look into. So like the Giants here, number 20 in the Super Contest rotation order, plus the 6.5. So the 3 games I very much expect to be on my card for this week: Lions plus 6, Raiders plus 8.5, Giants plus 6.5. So once again here, one of the hardest parts about the Super Contest, you've got to pick 5 games. Even if you don't like 5, you've got to find 5. So here's my list of leans with other games that I'm considering here for this week. And we start with number 11, the Indianapolis Colts. And Indianapolis has been good to me. 2-0 against the spread here in the Super Contest so far with the Colts. One game where they covered the number by a half point. Another game last week where they won outright as a field goal underdog against Tennessee. And, I understand why the line is moving down here on the Colts. Now they're back at home. Brissett really hasn't put up the numbers that you would expect in a Frank Reich offense, but that's not necessarily his fault either, because they've run the football quite a bit, and they've had a lot of success running the football. So, I know everyone is very anti-run here in the current state of the NFL, and I can't blame anybody for that. But if you're running the football effectively, run the football. If you're able to get 5 yards a carry or 5.5 yards a carry, like Indianapolis has for the most part this season, go ahead and run the football. So their ground game has been very, very good. And I think ultimately, in due time, that will open up some more opportunities for Jacoby Brissett. Brissett's not going to throw too many deep balls anyway, but he can get some chunk plays getting out in space. Safeties cheating up to stop the run. Linebackers, kind of doing the same thing there. I think the Colts can be very creative with this offense that they have. And there aren't many head coaches more creative than Frank Reich right now. So I think that could be a good thing for the Colts as they go forward. Kind of a shortish week for the Falcons here as well. They come off of that win on Sunday Night Football against Philadelphia. Monday is a completely lost day with the late start. You get back into it on Tuesday. Then you got to travel up to Indianapolis on Saturday. So a little bit of a shorter week here for the Falcons in this one. I do think that both teams probably have some success moving the football. I do believe that the Falcons, as I mentioned earlier, did hold Philly in check a little bit more than the final score would indicate. But still, I'm not completely sold on Matt Ryan and having Dirk Cotter back. I mean, look, Julio Jones made a play for him in the fourth quarter last week. Otherwise, they lose that football game. And the Colts are making a lot of plays. The defense is better than it has shown here so far. I think that they're still kind of working through some things in the back seven. But, again, the Colts on my short list of leans here, -1.5 hosting the Falcons. Number 27, the San Francisco 49ers are a 6.5-point favorite against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And my starting point on this game was to say, this feels like an overreaction. It feels like an overadjustment to Ben Roethlisberger being out, going to Mason Rudolph, who didn't play bad last week at all. It was the bad interception off the hands of Dante Moncrief that really changed that game, really turned around the complexion of that game. But one of the things that is very successful in the NFL, this isn't a trend or anything like that, it's just kind of something that generally tends to work out. Contrarian favorites do pretty well. And I think that the 49ers will be a contrarian favorite because people are going to look at them and say, well, they beat the Buccaneers who suck and they beat the Bengals who really suck. And maybe that is the case. But the 49ers have a very good pass rush now. They've focused primarily on the defensive line over the last 3 or 4 years in the draft. They can get after the quarterback. And if you can get after a guy like Mason Rudolph, who was a little bit indecisive at times last week and hasn't really played a whole lot, that's only going to help your cause on the defensive side. Will anybody other than Juju Smith-Schuster get separation? And even if they do, can Rudolph get rid of it before the pass rush gets there? But really the biggest reason I like the 49ers here in this spot, Kyle Shanahan is a master play designer. He is a great play caller. And if you look at the similarities with the Pittsburgh defense here in the first 2 games of the season against the Patriots and the Seahawks, they're lost back there. They don't have a captain of this defense. They don't have somebody in the middle of this defense who can relay the plays from the sideline to the rest of the players. They've gotten lost in coverage. They gave up 300 passing yards to Russell Wilson last week. We know Brady carved them up in week 1. Their defensive woes stand out a lot more to me than their shortcomings on the offensive side. I think Kyle Shanahan will take some pages from that New England playbook in week 1. You've got a long trip out west for Pittsburgh. And furthermore, Pittsburgh is in a state of flux. You already have those questions of, Will Ben Roethlisberger be back at all? Will he come back next season and give this another shot? Because Mason Rudolph is not the long-term answer. And I know that Pittsburgh just picked up Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously a sign that they're not throwing away this season by any means. But this is a much more flawed team than I originally thought and than a lot of people originally thought. I think the 49ers could get a pretty signature win here. I think they can get after Mason Rudolph, who, by the way, you're one hit away from Devlin Hodges becoming the quarterback for the Steelers. So you think it was bad last week with Ben going out. Just think if they got a kid who's never really played at the NFL level before trying to stare down that 49ers pass rush. I think the 49ers are riding high. I think that this is the start that they expected to get off to. I think Garoppolo only gets better as he's able to shake off the rust, and he was very, very good last week. So number 27, the San Francisco 49ers, 6.5-point favorite. I think a contrarian favorite in San Francisco may make the card here this week. Next up on the board, number 29, the Los Angeles Rams. They're a 3-point road favorite on Sunday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have been a mess. Even against the Jets, they didn't play particularly well. Baker's missing throws. You know, the pass rush has been phenomenal for Cleveland, and that is what gives me pause here in this game, is that pass rush can completely change a game. But when you look at the Browns here otherwise, Nick Chubb, very hit or miss. The two big plays from Odell Beckham in that Monday Night Football game, the one-handed catch and the catch and run, that was the majority of Cleveland's offense. Now they don't have David Njoku, so they miss another weapon. Baker's just not playing up to par. And if you look on the defensive side for the Browns, Christian Kirksey is an enormous loss for that defense. You know, one of the reasons that eventually settled on the Browns along with the line value is that C.J. Mosley was out for the Jets last week. Christian Kirksey plays a similar type of role for this Cleveland defense. And again, I just mentioned, you know, they do have Joe Schobert, but I just mentioned how the Steelers don't have that captain, that guy to relay play calls. You know, will the Browns have that guy without Kirksey? Will it have to be Schobert? They didn't have Demarius Randall last week either. They've got some injury concerns in the back seven that obviously you worry about here against the Rams team. I get it. Jared Goff is bad on the road. He's much better at home. He's bad on the road. It's been talked about a ton. It's probably baked into this line even. But there's more continuity on the Rams side with Sean McVay, with Wade Phillips. This is a big boy spot for the Cleveland Browns. Spotlight is on you. Sunday Night Football. Liquored up, excited crowd. I think they fall short. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think Baker Mayfield is there yet. And once again, interception problems have been plaguing him throughout the course of his young career. You give the Rams extra possessions, you're really going to be up against it here in this game. So, number 29, the Los Angeles Rams -3. One more lean for me here on the card. Then I got one more for you here. And again, maybe a contrarian favorite in this one. Number 31, the Chicago Bears, who are a 4-point favorite. Now, I mentioned liking Washington a little bit on Thursday's edition of the show. But as I dug deeper, I don't like Washington, and I may even like Chicago here. Mitch Trubisky gets a big respite this week. Goes from the Packers, who look like they're going to be much improved on defense under Mike Pettin, and the Broncos. The Broncos have not gotten to the quarterback, but they defend well. They scare you. They scare you into getting rid of the football early. Trubisky now takes on Washington. No pass rush, and can't stop the run. This is a good chance for a get-right type of game for this Bears offense. Look, Washington has moved the football this year, but they've moved it against the bad Philadelphia secondary that I mentioned earlier, and a Dallas defense that knew that they could score whenever they wanted to in last week's game. So I guess it's a big step up in class here for this Washington defense. I guess it's a good opportunity for the Chicago defense and a good opportunity for Matt Nagy to get Mitch Trubisky right in this game. Now, one of the things I don't like about this game, and I'll have to weigh the importance of this, is that this is a look-ahead spot for Chicago. They play on Monday Night Football. They come back home and host the Minnesota Vikings. Also, maybe the Chicago offense just isn't that good. Maybe Trubisky just isn't the guy. Maybe he is going to regress here this season. So I would say of the 4 leans I have, this is probably the lowest probability to make the card, but still I wanted to throw it out here for you. Take a look at the Chicago Bears -4. So once again here, my 3 very likely picks for the Super Contest: the Lions +6, the Raiders +8.5, and the Giants +6.5, with the Colts -1.5, 49ers -6.5, Rams -3, and Bears -4 as my set of leans here this week for the Super Contest. And make sure you check out our article on Saturday over at BangTheBook.com with our official cards for Week 3 of the Super Contest. And then also keep an eye out for our Circa Million preview as well with our official cards over in that contest.